So, before we start on Parshat Vayishlach, just tell me if there's any stories in this week's Parsha that are sort of confusing, that you're wondering what they're doing in Chumash. I'll give the topic in a minute. I just want to. Here's 3 a.m, so I know I'm not awake, but maybe you guys are awake. Just give me an example of a topic in Parshat Vayishlach that's sort of is strange or doesn't make that much sense. Anybody?
The story of Dvorah.
Oh, that's a good one. In other words, it's not the mention of Dvorah that she died, and whose death is missing that you would expect.
Rivka.
Yeah, there was Rivka's. It's not mentioned her death, but Dvorah her Meneket is, which is really strange. Okay, that's too short a topic though for a share. And the other one, real quick.
How about Esau sending the angels or messengers of those who went before? Sorry, Jacob sending them to Esau and something or the equivalent or something coming back. There was no need to have sent anything per se. And if they were angels, why would Jacob have agency over them?
Oh, even if malach means an angel.
If Malach means an angel, but it could be things.
But if malach means a messenger, it's normal. Like most malachim,
it would be normal.
Normal people. Yeah, that's a philosophical question. That's for sure. But
what
I think
wrestling with the angel.
Okay, it's why does he have to have a fight? That's okay. And
the disparity between Jacob's success and Esau's success. Jacob is leaving the land with full of stuff, and here, his brother has 400 men, let alone whatever comes with that. So he prospered way more than Jacob did.
Well, you're asking basically why is it that Esau got the blessings and not Yaakov?
How about getting rid of the avodah zaras of the Elohim?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. When they when Yaakov's called to go to Beit El, and he tells everyone in the family, get rid of all the idol worship. How did they get all that idol worship? No, it can't be just Rachel Strophim, whatever those were. Okay, that was.
What about the overarching question of why didn't he go straight home?
What do you mean? Why didn't he go straight home?
Yeah, he was supposed to go home, and he did a whole bunch of other things, but he doesn't get home until the end, and he missed his mother's death and funeral. He said, I need to come. He said, that was the vow. You'll bring me back and I will return to my father's house. And all these other things happen. He doesn't get to his father's house until the very end.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Achron Chaviv. How's that? That was the question I was hoping for. And I'll try to relate to all the other ones at the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. And here we go. Oh, actually, it's on the screen there. There we go. And Yaakov's return back home. What would you expect to happen? I want to begin. I think that was Ruth's question. I'll try to get to all the other questions by the end. But what would you expect to happen in the Parsha? So I apologize for the Hebrew, but I'll translate. If I look at what Yaakov says to Lavan when he wants to go home, so after Rachel has a child, Yaakov says, what's he saying? He says the following. He tells Lavan, Shacheni v'achel makomi ve'el. A second, I'm going to close this up. It says, Shacheni v'achel makomi u'lartzi. Let me go back to my place. I'll make a big deal about the word makomi and to my land. Okay. And then in the dream, God tells Yaakov 6 years later, I'm the God of Beit El, that you made me a neder. Remember? And then neder, as Ruth mentioned, says, V'shavti b'shalom Beit Avi. I'll come back to the house of my father. Remember that word bait as well. And now, Atakum Tsemer, B'shuva Eretz Ma'aladetecha, I go back to the land that you were born, you were born. And then Yaakov on his way out, this is the best one. He takes his children with him and puts them on the Gemalim. And then by Asher he takes all of his goods with him when he runs away from Lavan. When he leaves, the last pasuk before he leaves, basically in the end of last week's parsha, he's on his way to see Yitzchak, his father. So what should happen? He's going to have his encounter with Lavan. Here's what should happen. He encounters Lavan. That was the end of Parsha Vayetze. He has an encounter with Esav because he finds out Esav is out to meet him. How Esav knows he's coming, that's something that I always wondered. No, he's sending messengers to Esav. How do you know exactly where Esav is and where he's coming from? But maybe we'll deal with that later on. But either way, he gets past Esav. He should travel back home to see his parents who are living in Hebron. He should establish his family, maybe raise his children, etc. Basically be a normal person, and he should fulfill his promise to build a house for God. Remember, before he left, he didn't say, I'll come back home. That was part of the condition. If God brings me home. But he said, he put the Matzeva is going to be a Beit Elohim. You should build a house for God, or at least make a name for God. Okay? Now, before we answer the question, I want to go over where are the Avot living? Let me stop the share for a second. Was Avram living in one specific city at any time? Just name me the cities that Avram seemed to be living at.
Beersheba.
Okay, Beersheba was one. That's Rebbe Eshel.
The question is why when he went to the Akedah, he was from Hebron, but then when he after the Akedah, he went back to Beersheba.
How do you know he left to the Akedah from Hebron?
Didn't it say he was living in Hebron before that?
He was in he was in Hebron, Elonim Mamre in the story of Stone. But when he meets the Plishtim, he was in Grar, and then he made a treaty, and then he made an Esau in Beersheba. I'm pretty sure the Akedah was he left from Beersheba.
But I thought Sarah was died in Hebron, and that's where he buried her.
Oh, good question. That was after the Akedah, he returns to Beersheba.
Right.
And the next story, Sarah dies, and she's in
Hebron.
In Hebron. Therefore, people have a midrash on that maybe they separated because of what happened with Yitzchak. But I'm going to suggest a very different answer, which I think will make a lot of sense in a minute. So he's definitely been in Hebron and Elonim Mamre. He's been in Beersheba. He's been in Grar. How about Yitzchak? Where was he living?
That's Be'er Lahai Roi.
He was going back and forth from Be'er
Back and
Lahai
forth.
Roi. He was
But
also in Hebron.
Yeah.
He was also in Beersheba, wasn't he?
Well,
Not to
yeah,
mention
it's around in car. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Okay.
nomads. They move
See,
around.
to solve all the problems, they're nomadic for a good reason. In other words, first of all, as far as the climate goes, if you're a nomadic person, you have a lot of sheep, you have to go where your sheep have food, number one. And also if you're not a bona fide member of the society, it means if you're a nomadic person, if you don't own any land, if you're not sovereign, you're nomadic. And therefore you go where we need to be. But during the winter in Israel, people live on the coastal plain or in Shvela. In the summer, people come up to the mountain range. So don't be surprised that we find our Avot traveling all the time. And I'll show you even a better line in a minute. That's what God told them to do. I'll share with you the pasuk in a minute. So let me share a couple of points here about why the Avot are nomadic, which explains why they're in so many different places. Okay. So first of all, they're Ivrim. Remember Avram's original journey from Mesopotamia. In the children of Aver, their places seem to be scattered over the Middle East. When you own sheep, okay, and you don't own land, you have to be nomadic. We went to the place Avram and Yitzchak were living, back forth, but the climate, cold in the winter, nice in the summer, so it makes sense to move. But the main thing is, after Lot left, God promised Avram Avinu to look in all four directions, because the land that you're in, I'm giving to you and your children. Remember something like that? And here's a big line, Pasuk Yitzayin. Kumi talech ba'aretz lo kal rochba lecha inana. God commanded Avram towards the very beginning Parshat Lech Lecha, after Lot left him, he was first. Remember, Avram came. We'll trace where he went to. First, he went to Shechem, then he went to Bethel, then he went to Elonim Mamre, then he went back to Egypt, came back from Egypt. That was for the famine. And then he's in Gerar. He's in a lot of different places. But basically, God told him, Kum hitalech ba'aretz. Walk to them to lengthen its width, because you're getting it. So there seems to be a value in the Avot being nomadic and being over the land of Israel. So don't be surprised we find them in different places. Okay. And then finally, Avram pitches his tent, and he sets up in Elonim Mamre, which is Hebron. And he builds a Mizbeach there. So I think one key place where the Avot are living is in Hebron. And but it makes sense that they would be in Beit El. It makes sense it would be in Gerar. It makes sense they'd be in Beersheba, but they travel a lot. Now, when Yaakov left, what city did he leave from? Just checking if anyone's awake.
Beersheba.
Yaakov left. He left from Beersheba, right?
Beersheba, from Beersheba.
And therefore, where was most likely his father living at the same time, and his mother? In Beersheba, right? Now, when Yitzchak comes home, I'm sorry, when Yaakov comes home, where's his father living?
Hebron.
In Beer Lachai Roi?
Okay, it's not far from Hebron.
Beer Lachai Roi is south of Beersheba. But put it this way, does it ever say that he came to his father?
No.
Where does it say that Yaakov came back to his father?
It doesn't.
I wouldn't say it doesn't, but
Excuse me, it does. There's a pasuk
Of course it does.
that it came back to Hebron.
okay, so we're going to go to that pasuk.
After Beit El,
Kiryat-
he goes back.
Kiryat Arba. He finds him in Kiryat
Yeah.
Arba.
He's going to find him at the end of the day in, here we go.
ויבוא יעקב אל יצחק אביו ממרא קריית הארבע היא חברון.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to open up a Chumash now and show you what that pasuk is. Okay, I apologize for the Hebrew, but this is real easy Hebrew. At the very end of this week's parsha, the end of Perek Lamed Hey, before we get and the Yaakov stories are over, and Perek Lamed Vav, at the very end of the parsha, we're told Yaakov's children are 12. Got it? All Leah's kids, all Zilpah's kids, Rachel's kids, basically all the children. Then we're told in Pasuk Chav Zayin, Vayavo Yaakov el Yitzchak Aviv Mamrei Kiryat Arba, Hi Hebron, Asher Gam Sham Abraham Yitzchak. Yaakov returns to what city? To Elonei Mamre, right, which is near Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, okay, where Avram and Yitzchak lived. Okay, and then Vayu Yimei Yitzchak Mat Shana V'Shmonim Shana Vayikva Yitzchak Vayamot, and Yitzchak died. Now, that's surprising, isn't it? It doesn't make sense that Yaakov never came back to his father until his father died. Agreed? And these psukim at the very end are summary psukim. I'll show you them in a minute. But basically, I want to accept both answers that you just gave me. Someone said it never says he came back home, and someone says it says he comes back home at the end of the parsha. But it doesn't say he came back home during the parsha. At the end of the parsha, there's summary psukim that have closure, and we'll see almost every time in Sefer Breshit, we introduce one of the Avot with Elu Todot, and then we end up with their death. If you follow the pattern in Breshit, there's Elu Todot of a certain person, and then we end up with the person's death. Remember, we have Sarah, and then we have the life of Avram, and like we even have the life of Terach, and Terach dies, remember?
And Noah, no?
Yeah, at the end of Noach. But whenever you have Toldot, the key person in the Toldot, we find out about his death at the end of the story. But that's closure. That's not part of the ongoing story. What I want to show you now is that Yitzchak returning home is never written in the ongoing story. Instead, we get things that we don't expect. Okay, so let's take a look. What I want to do now, I want to trace what Yaakov does on his way home and where he goes. Because we explained before what he should do. He should go home to see his father. And on the one hand, it never says it in the ongoing story. We know it did happen because we find out about that in the summary, but not part of the ongoing story. So let's look at the ongoing story now and see what happens. So I'm going to share my screen again and back to, here we go. Okay, what does happen? He encounters Lavan, that was last week's Parsha. He encounters Esav, beginning of this week's Parsha. He stops in Sukkot. Chazal claimed for a year and a half, which is strange. Why would he stop in Sukkot for so long? Remember, it was only a 7-day journey from Lavan to the Gilad. From the Gilad to Hebron is another couple of days at most. And there's no reason it should take a year and a half. Then after he returns from Sukkot, he stops in Shechem. He seems to be in Shechem for quite a while with the whole Shechem incident. From Shechem, he goes to Beit El. And then there's 2 stories about his return to Beit El, which is really strange. We'll get to that later in a minute. Then Rachel dies on the way to Ephrata in Beit Lechem. And then he sets up his tent past Migdal Eder. Then there's the Reuven and Bilam incident. And that's the end of the story. Okay, I'm going to go through this in a minute inside the Chumash. But basically, it doesn't mention his return to Hebron or Beersheba in the ongoing story. It only says it in the summary. Oh, here's the psukim we read. The story of Yitzchak began with Ela Todot Yitzchak ben Avram Holidet Yitzchak. The story of the birth of Yaakov and Esav. And that was Todot Yitzchak, as Rashbam explains, is not the story of Yitzchak, it's a story of Yitzchak's children. And therefore it begins with the birth of, with Rivka expecting and having twins. And then the birthright, and then all the stories of the blessings and Yaakov running away. And then at the end of our story of Yaakov ends. He travels past Migdal Eder. The story of Reuven and Bilhah. Yisrael hears about it. We have a break in the middle of a pasuk. We have a parsha break. And then Yaakov's children are 12. These are summary psukim. Leah's kids, Rachel's kids, Bilhah and Zilpah. And then Elu b'nei Yaakov. Then it says in green, Yaakov comes to his father in Mamre, Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron. And then Yitzchak died, and who buries him? Yaakov and Esav together. Hope my question is clear. Right. So my big question today is, why is that safe for the end? And before I explain the answer, I'm going to give the answer. I want to claim Yitzchak goes straight home. Because he doesn't wait years and years till he goes home. It just doesn't make sense. Because he says he's coming home, and there's no logical reason why he wouldn't go home. Because I don't have to explain why it takes so long till he gets home. I need to explain why Chumash never mentions it. Okay? You follow the difference? I have proof that he came home from the end of the Parsha. But when you look where it's mentioned that he came home, this is not part of the chronological order. These are summary psukim, and this can't be that he came home a day before his father's funeral. This tells me that he came home to his father sometime during his life, and that both Yaakov and Esav came to the funeral. But I know that he came home, but his coming home is not part of the ongoing story.
Do you ever puzzle about the fact that when he left from Beersheba, and he doesn't return to Beersheba. He knows somehow, what did he do? Pass through Hebron and say, "Oh, look, Daddy's here."
So
Yeah,
I mean, he
yeah.
knows where Esav's living. It looks like he knows where his father's living also.
How? He left him in Beersheba, and then 20 years later, those are little details that we shouldn't bother ourselves with that he found out.
I'm not sure, but for some reason, it seems to be that between Padan Aram and Lavan and Canaan, they know what's going on with each other. There's some type of, they're getting mail or having visitors, because when Rivka goes on her trip, they bless her with Brit Ben Abtarim, don't they? Remember? She gets a blessing that Avram got it at Brit Ben Abtarim.
Well, no, but she also gets blessed with you will inherit the gates of your enemy, which is something else.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but the wording, they're aware of what's going on with each other, right? They know they have children. I just think it seems like there's communication between the two places. That's number one. So it could be because of that he knows. There's another question I thought someone asked: how come Rivka never sends for him? Rivka tells Yaakov, "I'm going to send for you," but I think the answer to that is clear. Rivka said, "I'll send from you when the coast is clear."
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how do we know the coast isn't clear yet?
We shouldn't send them.
Because Yaakov doesn't think the coast is clear.
Wait,
because he thinks Esau's still out to get him.
yeah. Oh, but then of course there's that lovely midrash that Devorah was the messenger who was
Was the
sent.
messenger, okay. But again, that story you have to see when that happened. Right. It could be maybe she did send for him, but God had to tell him it's time to come home. No, it's basically we never find the story of the messenger coming. What I'm getting at, there's a lot of details in the story that are totally missing that you expect to be there. Now, so again, I just established the problem of that Yitzchak does come home, it doesn't say when. Now I got to explain the chronology problem in the story. I want to go over just the chronology problem, and then I'll show you in the Parsha. If I go back to what happens in our Parsha, what happens? Yaakov encounters Esav, stops in Sukkot, stops in Shechem, and then leaves Shechem because of what happened there, and then goes to Beit El when he leaves Shechem, and then keeps on going. Now, in the story of Shechem, let me stop the share for a minute. Everyone knows the famous story of Shechem. Dinah is taken, she's raped, her brothers come to save her, the whole thing. Right? If you had to put on a play of that story, how old are the characters? What's the youngest Dinah could be in that story? Just biologically, what's the youngest she could be?
12.
It's got to be like 12 or something like that. Unless you, just basic common sense. It's got to be in the 12. How old are Shimon and Levi? I'll call them Narei Gvaot for the modern day analogy. No, they're maybe high school kids, but probably college kids. Definitely young adults. They're not bar mitzvah boys, right? In other words, the story, the kids have to be in their late teens, early 20s. I'll show you in a minute. They can't be much older because Yosef is sold when he's 17, right? And so when Yosef sold, the brothers are 6 years older and 5'4". There's like 6 years in between them, or 7 years in between their birth. So they're they can't be too old. Now let's go back. Let me share my screen and do the math real fast. Yaakov is by Lavan for how many years? 20 years by Lavan, but he doesn't get married until 7 years after he gets there. And therefore, when they leave Lavan, assuming that Reuven is born in year 8 or so, when they leave Lavan, Reuven is around 12 or 13 at most. Shimon and Levi 10 and 11. Dinah maybe 3 or 4. It seems like some of them are born when Yaakov was working for the 6 years because they don't fit in the first 7 years. But that's a different issue. But when they leave with all the kids are very young. Got that? Now, if the Shem story happens when Yaakov returns, the math doesn't work. Understand?
Right.
So either Yaakov comes back all the way from Lavan to see his father, the whole thing, stops in Shechem, stays in Shechem for years. It just can't be. Got it? So my first conclusion is the story of Dinah and Shechem and Shimon and Levi, etc., had to be later. How much later? There's a window it can be in, but it's got to be 5-10 years later. Okay, that's number one. Then the question is going to be why is it out of place? Now, so when Yaakov should return, how should he return? He should return geographically the same way Abraham came from Mesopotamia. Why? When you're coming from the Gilad in Mesopotamia and you come into Israel, you cross, let's say, by Nahal Yabok, where he was. In other words, that's crossing by what's called Gesher Adam today, coming from Abdallah Bridge in Jordan, whatever it is. In other words, you cross by the Jordan River, pretty much. You go up Nahal Tirzah to Shechem, to the mountain range. From Shechem, you work your way down from Shechem to Shiloh, to Beit El, to Hebron, to Beersheba. I'm sure you're familiar with the map. But it would make sense for Yaakov to stop in Shechem and Beit El on his way to Elonei Mamre. And he knows, for some reason, his father's in Elonei Mamre. No.
You would have to stop there anyway. And if
you have to stop there anyhow, that's right. It's the main city on the way. Now, it would make sense that his return would be like his father. Like his grandfather. He should stop in Shechem on the way. Stop in Beit El, because he made an eder there. He made a promise, and then go see his father. So if he doesn't go to Elonei Mamre right away, I understand that because he has to travel on the way there. There's nothing wrong with making a short stop in Shem and a short stop in Beitel, like Avram did. But he should be on his way. And I want to show you Yaakov does exactly that, okay? Right? But it's not recorded in order, okay? So let's go what happens. Yaakov arrives in Israel after meeting Esav, okay? He arrives in Shechem, and he's Jewish. He buys some real estate, we'll see. Okay? He builds an altar like Avram did. Then there's going to be the insert of the story of the Shechem coming many years later. Okay? Then we have to cut this out chronologically. Then he comes to Beit El, gets his name changed, makes it official, which should happen soon after the story with the Malach, right? And then he continues traveling from Beit El towards Hebron, stopping in Beit Lechem. On the way, Rachel dies, and then the story with Ruvain, and basically then the story's over. I'm going to show you now. I have to explain why there's an insert, and give a technical reason why there's an insert, and then a thematic reason. Okay. So I hope you understand my screen here. I don't expect you to be able to read this. This is simply, I copied the way the Sefer Torah looks. So here's what happens. Yaakov returns in the end of Parak 33, in the end of Parak Lamed Gimel. Yaakov returns complete, or Shalem, from Shechem. We'll deal with that pasuk later. He buys a field, he builds a Mizbeach. So the first thing he does when he comes to Israel is the same thing Avram did. He comes to Shechem, he builds a Mizbeach, and thanks God, okay? We have the whole Dinah story, which I'm leaving out, okay? The Dinah story. And Yaakov going to Beit El is part of the Dinah story. I'll prove that in a minute. In other words, when at the end of the Dinah story, Yaakov is afraid that all the neighboring people are going to come and chase him because of what he did to Shechem. And sure enough, that's what should be happening. And to save Yaakov, Yaakov is told by God to go to Beit El, and there I'll save you. And then get rid of your idol worship. That whole section, all of chapter 34, and the first 8 Pesukim of 35, this whole piece, I want to claim, happened years later. And therefore, I'm going to go from the end of chapter 33, when Yaakov stops in Shechem and buys real estate, and jump right to chapter 35, verse 9. And then we're going in perfect order. All I need to do is take this insert of the Dinah story and say it happened later, and then explain why it's inserted. So I'm going to read it in chronological order now. Yaakov arrives in Israel, stops first in Shechem, where he should. He has a family and things, so he might be going slowly, but he's going to take the opportunity and buy a field. I'll move to English stock in a minute. And then he continues to Beit El. In Beit El, he gets his name changed official, which should happen soon after the argument with the Malach. That would make sense. He gets the blessing finalized, the blessing that God's giving him, which is formalizing the blessing that Yitzchak sent him with. Remember, Vel Shaddai Yivarech Otcha. We'll return to that soon. And then he continues traveling. Rachel dies on the way towards Hebron. He buries Rachel, and then he travels past Migdal Eder. Right? And then we're told the story of Yaakov, Ruvain, and Bilhah, and the story ends abruptly. Got that? What's called the Yaakov narrative and his return just ends abruptly out of nowhere. We have the summary, and we're only told in passing at the very end that he came home to his father. Okay? Now, so we're going to read it slowly now and try to figure out what happened. Yaakov comes Shalem Ir Shechem. Now, anyone know the machloket about what Shalem here means?
Yerushalayim.
Shalem is either the name of the city, Salem, there's a city in Yerushalayim, Salem, that's Rav Samet holds that, or he comes complete, as Rashi says, Shalem b'mamunot notes, he comes with the whole family, complete, he has a living, and he's in peace now, etc. And I think that's a much better explanation, because if I go back to God's promise to Abraham Avinu, Bashivoticha, I'll bring you back to this land, but Yaakov said in his neder, V'shavti b'shalom Beit Avi. Therefore, it makes sense he comes Shalem to Beit Avi, which goes back to his neder. I'll open up his neder in a minute in the Chumash, in Canaan, okay? When he came back from Paran, and he sets up outside the city, okay? He buys a field, remember, he has a lot of real estate and he has a lot of cattle. He needs a place to settle down. He's thinking for his future. And he puts a mizbeach there. He calls out and he thanks God. He calls the mizbeach the God of Israel, but he's doing what Avram did, and he's thanking God for his return. But it doesn't say that he stayed there yet. Now, here we have our insert, and then I'm going to go right now to what I think happened next. God appeared to Yaakov when he came back from Padan Aram. Vayakov Yov Shalem Ersh Beres Canaan Bevo'om mi Padan Aram.
Are Padam Aram and Aram Naharaim the same place?
No. Ram Naharaim, I think, is what he called. Is much farther south of Mesopotamia. That's where Avram is from originally. But Aram is the name for the whole area. Padan Aram is one place, and Ram Naharaim is another place farther down the Fertile Crescent. I think Padan Aram is near Haran. That's up in Syria, not far from the Iraqi-Syria border. It's on the northern part of the Euphrates, and the Aram Naharaim is closer to the Persian Gulf. But what's important, he's coming back from Padan Aram, and that's where Lavan was. That's where he sent away to get a wife. So again, here Padan Aram, and that's where they match. And Elohim tells him, your name changed. It's not going to be Yaakov anymore. It'll be Yisrael, which matches what happened with the Malach earlier in the Parsha on his return, but he meant Esav. And then God formalizes the blessing of the name change with Ani El Shaddai. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the Brit Milah blessing. If I remember, I think Rabbi Helpka talked about this last week. That the blessing of Avram is confirmed now on Yaakov. Right? And then he reassures the promise of the land that he gave Avram and Yitzchak. And then Elohim leaves, and that's the last time until that God talks to Yaakov until when? Someone asked before, how come he never goes to Beersheba? Is that true or not? Did we ever find Yaakov in Beersheba?
Yeah, but that's later, after the Yosef business.
On the way to Mitzrayim.
Right to Egypt.
On his way down to Egypt.
Yeah.
In fact, Ramban deals with that question, and he claims Beersheba is where you get an exit visa. And he wants to I'm pretty sure this Ramban brings up the possibility that Yaakov was living in Hebron with Rivka, etc., with the whole family, because that's where Yitzchak is later on. And before he goes to Haran, where does he have to stop? He has to stop in Beersheba to get an exit visa. It's a strange Ramban, but he's bothered by that question. So geographically, it's not right. What?
To go from Hebron to Beersheba and then go up north?
If you know Israeli background,
that's goofy.
If you're living in Israel, you wouldn't be surprised. You go all the way down to Misrata Pnim in Beersheba to get an exit visa to the country. But Ramban's not on a thematic level, because Vayetz Yaakov in Beersheba, and then he has a promise, even though you're leaving, you're coming back. And Yaakov is leaving from Beersheba, and God says, even though you're leaving, you're coming back. You understand the thematic? When you leave from Beersheba, you're leaving the country, but you're leaving, and God said you're coming back, even though you're leaving. But that's thematic, not necessarily geographic. Okay, now back to our story now. Now I have to figure out why it's out of order. Number one. What we're getting at, though, there's a lot of stories that are missing that you would expect to happen, and there's a lot of stories that you wouldn't expect to be there, and they happened. Got it? As you mentioned, right? The death of Dvorah Meneket Rivka doesn't belong. What's it doing there? But the death of Rivka is missing. Yaakov going to Hebron is missing. But what? But going to Migdal Eder is there. Got it? But what's going on? I'm missing what I would expect. That's the main thing I want to show you. Now let's go back and do the story of what happened in Shechem. Where are we? Let me share my screen with let me open up a regular Chumash now. So we have nice in English. Let me go back to Yaakov's Neder in Breshit. No, I want a regular Chumash. A nice, good old English Hebrew. Here we go. Bible, English Hebrew, Breshit. I want to just go back and take a quick look at Yaakov's Neder, what he said he's going to do. Okay. God told Yaakov, no, it's God, when Yaakov's leaving from Beersheba, God promises him, you're chosen, etc., the whole thing, and says, I'll be with you. I'll bring you back. I'll take care of you. I'll bring you back to this land. I won't abandon you until I take care of you. Yaakov, what does he do? He says, oh, this is a great place to build a house for God when I come back. Yaakov calls the place Beit El, right? He names it. He's not naming the city. He's naming his resolve to build a house for God. Then he makes his famous promise, his resolution. Remember, he's not making a prediction that there'll be a temple here in thousands of years from now. He's making a resolution. When he comes back, he'll build a house for God. Okay? What's he saying? If God will be with me on my travels, as he promised, and indeed, if he'll take care of me, or I would even understand im is when, not only if, but when God keeps his promise, and he'll be with me, if I'm worthy, and takes care of me on the way, and keeps me alive with food and clothing, and brings me back b'shalom. Remember, Yaakov Shem brings me back b'shalom to my father's house, see Beit Avi, as Ruth mentioned in the beginning, and God will be with me. Or some Ramban says that's already his promise. Then he'll be my God, means I'll serve him, I'll represent him. Then this Evan, this spot that I marked with this rock that I put oil on, which I made as a monument, that's going to become a Beit Elokim. My claim is that's not a promise. I mean, that's not a prediction. That's a promise. He wants to settle down and build a house for God and make a name for God, like Abraham and Yitzchak did when things quieted down. And everything, from all the wealth that I'll achieve, I'll give 10% to God. That's when he's left. And now when he comes back, he should come back and fulfill his neder. Let me prove that to you. Because on his way home, in chapter 31, okay, he gets scared. Remember, there's the anti-Semitism. He comes back. He's scared of, he has to run away because he thinks the local population, his own family's going to kill him. Okay? And then God tells Yaakov, go back to the land of your ancestors, and there I'll be with you. Stay here. Remember, God says, V'hinei anochi imach. So God says, it's midnight, if you know the Cinderella analogy. And if you want me to be with you, you have to leave and go back to your land. Remember, Hinei anochi imach. I'll only be with you now. I was with you in Chutz La'aretz. It's time to come home. Yaakov convinces his wives to come with him. And then he tells his wives the story of what happened. God came to him in a dream. Remember? And what's his dream? He says as follows. He says, Anochi, this is God talking to Yaakov before he leaves. Anochi ha'el Beit El. I'm the God of Beit El. Remember that name. I'm the God of Beit El. And you made a matzeba there. You marked the spot. Okay? And you made a promise to build me a house. You made a neder. Okay? And now, come back to this land, right? And come back and return. Get out of the land that you're in now, and return to the land that you were born in, of your birth. Understand? God's telling him, the God of Beit El, where he made the promise to build a house for God, come back to your homeland. Okay? They agree to come. Okay, and what happens? We saw these psukim before, 18 and 19. Okay. Yaakov gives up. Vayisad banav et nashav al gmalim means his children are young. He's got to put them. They're not walking with him. They have to go on camels. He takes all of his cattle with him and all his ruchosh. Okay. Lavo Yitzchak aviv al Canaan. He's on his way to his father Yaakov. We're all in chapter 31. Lavan chases him. We have the whole chasing, and that's over. And God saves him. And we have that whole big argument. What happens at the end of the story? They make a treaty, and then in chapter 32, what happens? He says goodbye to Lavan. Then Yaakov halach ledarko, vayivgo b'malchei Elohim. That's closure from what he left. Remember, he sees Malchei Elohim leaving and coming. Okay, and then he meets. We have the whole encounter with Esav. Okay, he gets past Esav, which we talked about. That's not our topic though today. And then he gets to. He gets past Yaakov through, he's in Nacho Yabok. He passes Penuel. Basically, he's going through Nacho Yabok, going into the Jordan Valley. And then we're in chapter 33 now. That's still his encounter with Esav. He passes through that. He has to fight with the Malach. He gets the name change. Remember, that's happening when this fight with Esav with the Malach, and that'll be official when he comes back. And then he passes Esav. Esav offers, let's travel together. And Yaakov explains why he can't, because the children are going too slow, etc. And they leave in peace. That if Esav leaves and moves on, and Yaakov goes on his way. Okay, Esav goes on his way back to Seir, and Yaakov goes to Sukkot. Now, this is strange. Yaakov goes to Sukkot, which is in the Jordan Valley. Right? He builds a house and sets up places for his cattle, and he calls the city Sukkot. Now, there's a famous Rashi here quoting Chazal that he was there for a year and a half. He went to Sukkot in the summer. He builds a house in the winter, and he comes back in the summer again. They want to give him a year and a half, which wouldn't make any sense to me. On the other hand, why is he building a house? Now, what does the word house mean many times in Tanakh?
Your
Is a
wife.
house a physical structure?
No, it's the
Family.
wife.
Family.
It's a family,
Family.
right? I'll give you an example. I'll give you a nice example. What does Yaakov say to Lavan when he where he makes that business deal? That's going to be in chapter 29. No, wrong one. Chapter 31. No, 30.
ומתי אעשה
Beiti,
לביתי?
that's what perfect. That's what I'm looking for. He wants to leave and takes up here. He says, okay, he says right here. Here. He says, keep me by first love, by broken ken, but matai esegam anochi lebeiti. At Har Sinai, what are we told? Kot Tamar, the Bnei Yisrael, Kot Tamar lebeit Yaakov, v'tagid lebnei Yisrael. Beit Yaakov is a concept. Let me share with you something, which I think will make a lot of sense. Doesn't David HaMelech want to build a house for God? Right?
And
This is key now.
says, I build your house, David. That is
Yeah, David's going to tell God, I want to build a house for you. Let me share with you that. That's Shmuel Bet Perek Zayin. Let's open up my Chumash again and open up our full Tanakh now. If I go to Shmuel Bet Perek Zayin, Shmuel Bet Perek Zayin, Shmuel Bet. David's now in a palace. Okay? God gives him rest from his enemies. He says, I'm living in a palace. David says, God's still in a tent, and it's Mishkan. And Natan thinks it's a good idea. God says, not so fast. He doesn't mention the blood part here at all, but rather he tells him as follows. Okay. God will make you a house first. Meaning what? You'll have children, right? They'll take over for you, and you'll be established. Then he can build a house for me. In other words, someone can want to build a house for God, but to build a house for God, to make his name great, you have to be established, and people have to look up to you. So let me explain something, the key, which is, I should have explained this already in the beginning. Yaakov's goal is to be like Avraham and Yitzchak, to make a name for God. If I follow the theme, the key thing that Avram was doing is making a name for God. Remember, in Beitel, he builds a mizbeach, calls out in God's name. Now, you make a name for God by talking to other people about God. It only works when people look up to you. So Avram is established, he's wealthy, people look up to him, and therefore he can call out in God's name. Yitzchak, and Avram does it in Beitel, he does it in Hebron, and in Mamre, he does it in Beersheba. And the highlight of the story is the Abimelech comes and makes a treaty with him, and he goes to Beersheba and calls out in God's name. Yitzchak has a rougher ride on the way there, meaning he gets in a lot of fights with the people. They're jealous of him. There's Esek, there's Sitna. Finally, he makes peace in Rehovot. After he makes peace in Rehovot, Abimelech comes to him and wants to make a treaty, and he goes to Beersheba and calls out in God's name. What I'm getting at, you can't call out in God's name until when?
Unless you're established.
Until people respect you, which makes perfect sense, right? You have to be, that's what God's telling David. You're living in a time of war. Wars that had to be fought, important wars. But during a time of war, there's a time for war, a time for peace. You can't go public with the idea of making a name for God until other nations respect you. Sometimes you have to fight wars. There's a time for war to stay alive. Sometimes you're in survival mode, which is exactly Yaakov's life. You wish to be in revival mode, but sometimes you can't because of the situation you're in. So therefore, you can't make a name for God. Now, what Yaakov wants to do, Avram and Yitzchak built an altar and called out in God's name. Yaakov wants to establish it to something more official and bigger, making it a bayit. Mizbeach's not enough for him. I want a full temple. I want something much more official. I need like a party headquarters. Now, Avram and Yitzchak are more nomadic, and therefore they can only do something like a Mizbeach. A bayit, what's Yaakov dreaming of? Not just that he'll come back and be alive. He's not just, I want to survive. Yaakov wants to be established, to build a house for himself, and then build a house for God. After he's hoping, what I'm getting at, Yaakov is hoping that coming back from Laban, Brit Ben Abtarim is over. I think you've heard that share before, that Yaakov, by Laban, is the little Brit Ben Abtarim. Now, Yaakov is hoping that he'll come back, everything will be fine, and the nation will finally get started, and he sets his goal when he leaves in Bethel, that right now I can't build a house for God because I'm a fugitive, I'm running away, but when I come back, that's what I want to do. And therefore, Yaakov should come back and build a house for God, but he can't build a house for God until his house is established. He's not going to come back and build a house the day he returns. He's got to set up his family, get organized, make a name for himself, start a business, etc. Okay? And then he hopes to build a house for God. And that's what I want to show you now. Okay, let me just show you what, so we saw that pasuk by David. Now let's go back to see what Yaakov does. I'll just share a regular Tanakh now. We had the story of Shechem. Let's go back to where we were before in Breshit. Yaakov returns, and let's go to the end of chapter 33. He arrives in Israel. I'm assuming he was at Sukkot not that long. Okay, he's establishing his household, means his family's together. He survived basically Esav. Got it? He passed Esav. That was his big challenge. He was worried that his house was going to fall apart, wasn't he? Remember, he cuts them in half. Yaakov's family, he was afraid they'd be scattered. They wouldn't be complete. Now Yaakov is complete, meaning he survived Esav. He survived that encounter. Everyone made it. Now his house is established. He comes to Sukkot. Then he comes Shalem to Shechem, the same place Avram came to first. He buys real estate because he's planning for his future. He builds a Mizbeach like Avram did, and he calls him Mizbeach the God of Israel, meaning the God who took care of him. Remember, God will be with me. He's thanking God. He's not making a name for God because no one knows him yet, but he's thanking God for his return. Now, next, he should go to Bethel, and that's my claim. He goes to Bethel next. I'm going to skip the whole Shechem narrative. Got that? First half of 34, all 34. And then we pick up here after the Parsha break. This happens next. The Shechem thing happens later. God appears to Yaakov on his return. He blesses him. And then he makes the name change official, which happened recently. Got it? This is on his way to Hebron. Calls his name Yaakov. And Elohim tells him, Ani El Shaddai. That's what he told Avram by Brit Milah. And Yitzchak got his name, with El Shaddai gave him his name. When El Shaddai changed Avram's name to Abraham, at the same setting, he told Avram that Sarah's going to have a child, and his name will be Yitzchak. That's why Yitzchak doesn't need a name change. But El Shaddai is the God watching the Bechira process, choosing Avram, and only Yitzchak and not Yishmael. And then Yitzchak being chosen, Yaakov being chosen, and not Esav. And now it's over. And he gets what's called the Brit Milah promise. Again, we have time to do it, but it's the same promise that God gives Avram in Brit Milah in chapter 17 in Breshit. Promises them the land. Okay? And then Elohim leaves. And Yaakov should continue now to Hebron. Yaakov marks the spot, right? Matzevet Oven. He puts oil just before, like before. And what does he do now? Vayikra Yaakov et Shem HaMakom asher diber ito Hashem Elohim Beit El. Didn't he already name the city? Why is he naming it again? So when my class used to joke around, I used to say, when he's leaving, he put up a sign, Beit El population 1. And when he comes back, Beit El population 12. If you know the stories, those little signs when you go into cities in America. Now,
Wait,
But
so
six,
Menachem, do you think that the birth scene happens before this?
which first scene?
Benjamin, he's not born yet.
No, Binyamin's not born yet.
Benjamin. No, okay, he's not born yet.
Yeah,
So
he's not born.
we know his family isn't complete, but does he know? She must be pregnant now.
Oh, as far as the thing, I see what you're saying. Okay, I'll entertain both possibilities in a minute. Now let's take a look here for a minute. He's in Beit El, okay, Vaisumi Beit El, and then they're on the way to Efrat, which really should be on the way to Hebron. Got it? But it's on the way to Hebron, stopping in Ephrata. And then Rachel gives birth, and then we have Kever Rachel. Got it? Which is really sad. This is the sad part. And then Yaakov continues traveling, passing Migdal Eder, which people in Gush Yisrael want to say it's where Migdal Oz is today. And then we're told the strange story. Israel's in the land, and Reuven goes and sleeps with Bilhah. And then the story just ends. My key point is the story never finishes. Got it? Instead of the story finishing, we have this terrible story about Reuven and Bilhah. And then we get our summary psukim, which are very dry and technical, but they're not part of the story. They're just the conclusion. And here I see that he did come home. So I want to claim he definitely came home. No, over here, on his way back from Beit El. How long till, what do you call it? No, whether the Rivka story was later, but the birth of Binyamin might have been later or not. That's a good question. And that's the question, if the question, how much is Rachel lying when she says Derech Nashimli, that was when Yaakov leaves, is Rachel pregnant? If you can put the two and two together. That was when she's leaving. That question is did he leave with Rachel pregnant or not? That's a good question. But we'll leave that alone for now. What I'm getting at is that he doesn't come home. Now I'm going to run out of time, so let me get to my key point. Why the insert? So I'll give a real technical reason for the insert. Let me just go back to my first source sheet. I'll give a technical reason and then a thematic reason. First, let me show you that the first Beit El story had to be later. Why? If I go back to the end of the Dinah story, without getting into the argument about it, about who did the right thing, what happens? Yaakov tells Shimon and Levi, Acharta Moti. This is the end of chapter 34. You made me look bad. I'm embarrassed in the eyes of the people. Why? I'm small in number. They're going to retaliate and get back at me. Remember? They'll decide when and exactly how, but they're going to retaliate. Listen. V'nishmaneti aniu beiti. Got it? Yaakov is worried his whole home is going to be destroyed. Now, beiti, is that referring to his household, which is pshat, or maybe referring to his ability to build a house for God? I'll leave alone for now. He's worried. And then what solves the problem? Yaakov is in a dangerous situation. And listen carefully what God tells him. Vayomer Elohim el Yaakov, kum alei Beit El, v'shev sham, v'aseh sham mizbech le'el hanirah elecha b'varcha b'pnei Esav achicha. Go run away to Beit El, got it? And build a mizbech to who? To the God who saved you when you ran away from Esav. In other words, Beit El is going to become a city of refuge. Got it? It's going to be an Ir Miklat. And if you know the halacha, the Mikdash can also be an Ir Miklat. That's not, we didn't build a Mikdash to be an Ir Miklat, but sometimes a shul is where you gather. If you've been to the shul in Susia, they have the big door and everything. If you've been there, but shuls sometimes if you've been to Susia, there's all these underground. You go from the field, you go underground, and you end up in the shul. So if you were attacked from the outside, you could run away in the shul. That had a big door that you could close, and that was a place of protection. Now, ideally, the Beit Elohim should be a place for people like Isaiah talks about. All the nations will come and find God in the temple, in Isaiah chapter 2. But sometimes it becomes a place of refuge. So God's telling Yaakov, almost ironically, return to Beit El to save your life. Right? Now, they just wiped out Shechem, which means they have a lot of idol worship with them probably. If they remember they pillaged the city. So Yaakov tells his family, get rid of all the stuff you stole, all the Avodah Zarah you took from thing, which is in your houses. Cleanse yourselves, change your clothing. V'nakuma v'nala Beit El. Let's go to Beit El, and I'll build a mizbech there to who? To the God who answered me the last time I was in trouble. He's been with me all the way I went. In other words, Beit El is going to become a city of refuge for the people. He says, God helped me last time I was about to be killed by my brother Esav, and now he's coming to save me from the local population. But and so the people give to Yaakov all the foreign gods they had with them, and all the other avodah zarah stuff, all the other looting they took from the city of Shechem. Yaakov buries them under the tree in Shechem. Got it? Basically, then Vayisau, Vayichitat Elohim al harim asher sivotayim. There's a fear of God around them. V'lo rafach Rabbi Yaakov. Basically, God saves Yaakov because he's on his way to Beit El, and he got rid of his idol worship from taking Shechem. Then Yaakov comes to Luz. That was the name of the city beforehand, which is Beit El, okay, with his whole family and the people with him. Vayiven Sham Mizbech. He builds a Mizbech, but is he going to call it in God's name? Vaikra Lamakom El Beit El. What's he called the place? The God of Beit El. Why? Kisham niglu elav Elohim bevorchot b'bnei Esav. Running away from Esav. Got it? Don't you see what happened? Look, what does Beit El become? God tells Yaakov, go to Beit El. Le'el hanirai lecha bevorchot b'bnei Esav achicha. Last time you were in trouble. What's Yaakov tell his children? Le'el ha'onel ti b'yom tzarati. The God who I dab into when I'm in trouble. Then God saves him, and then Yaakov calls him Mizbeach El Beit El. Kisham niglu elav Elohim b'vorchot b'nei Esav achicha. See how sad it is? Beit El was supposed to be the place where he's going to make a name for God and build a house for God. Instead, it becomes a city of refuge. Why? Because of his kid's behavior. Now, you could argue from today to tomorrow. Let me get to my key point because my time's up. Hope you get my point. Yaakov is so typical of Jewish history. And I just made it a share in current events. If you didn't catch on. Yaakov's coming back to his land, has great hopes of his grandparents were to come back and build a house for God and make God's name great and be like to other nations, the whole thing that all the prophets are hoping for. And Yaakov finally returns after all these many years, and God takes care of him and brings him back. On the way, he has trouble. Unfortunately, everyone has good intentions. Dinah got raped. We can't put up with that, can we? Who's to blame for it? Well, we'll go through a whole list of the moral dilemmas Yaakov has. Shimon and Levi and Yaakov's sons, the older ones, are sure they're doing the right thing. Because we're in this land, no one's going to tell us what to do. If they do this, our sister, we have to burn down what's called Yisrofet Akfar, if you heard that saying. And then no one's going to mess with us anymore. Yaakov, this pacifist, what's he saying? You know what's going to happen? We're going to get, it'll be disaster. What's going to happen to my household? That's just afraid of death. I can't fulfill my goal. And unfortunately, because of Yaakov's children's behavior, which could be justified, you understand? I'm not saying they did the wrong thing. I think Chumash is saying they did the wrong thing. They overdid it. They could have done a surgical raid and not wipe out the whole city, but that's a different argument. But they're sure they're doing the right thing. That's what's so sad about it. Right? The brothers are sure doing the right thing, and this argument goes on forever, doesn't it? But unfortunately, what can't Yaakov do? Yaakov can only restate his neder that one day I'll build a house for God, but he's never able to fulfill it. Why? Because no one looks up to him. His whole neighbor, everyone in the country wants to kill him. He never reaches the status of Avram or Yitzchak. Remember, Avram achieved it right away. Yitzchak, after some trials and tribulations. Yaakov was hoping he'd come back and the difficult part of Jewish history would be over, and I could establish and build a house for God and everything would be great. I'd build a home. Instead, his whole life is full of tension and trouble and struggle. He's struggling all the time. And the poor guy means well. Every time he means well. But he always gets stuck, doesn't he? I'll go over all the list of things. And it's and whenever something major should happen, something sad happens, right? We should mention Rivka. Rivka is not mentioned. We mentioned the death of Devorah, right? Yaakov should go back home. Instead, we mentioned what happened with Reuven and Bilhah, which is the protest. I think we talked about that once. That when Leah died, when Rachel died, Yaakov should have taken Leah to his tent. Instead, he takes Bilhah, and Yaakov has to protest. I mean, Reuven has to protest for his mother's sake, and does something to make sure Yaakov won't sleep with Bilhah. He'll take Leah instead. So that's probably what's happening in that story. But what I'm getting at is if I look, let's go back to my main source sheet, and I'll finish with this. Where are we? Oh, Rabbi Jay's back. Okay. Here's our source sheet. So we went through all these psukim in English. Okay. We had the summary psukim at the end. Okay. So if I go through all these difficult decisions Yaakov faces in his life, he always look. Let's make a list of the moral dilemmas. What happens when he takes the birthright? When he grows up, what's he doing? Is he using leverage? Is he taking advantage of his brother, or is he doing the right thing? In other words, as Esav couldn't care less about taking leadership. If birthright, Bechorah, is leadership, is responsibility, not privilege. And Esav couldn't care less about that responsibility and would sell it for a bowl of soup. And Yaakov wants that responsibility and knows Esav shouldn't be doing it. So what he's doing something ideal. Because he wants to take leadership because the right person is not taking leadership. Or is Esav about to die and he's taking advantage of getting a double portion and using leverage on his brother, which I don't think that's what happened, but it looks like a dilemma there. Okay, now sending the blessings. You have to listen to your mother. If your mother says do it, do it. Then you want to. Why does his mother didn't tell him to lie? She was sure he'd get away with it. And then his father starts asking questions. What should I do? Get my mother in trouble, or should I lie and hope to get away with it so my mother won't get in trouble? It's afraid he'll get cursed. Yeah. What do? He had to make a quick decision. Okay? Now, when he does that genetic engineering on the sheep, right? Was he getting money he was due? Was that back wages? Was he ripping Lavan off in the business deal with the speckled sheep? Or was he doing the right thing? You could argue. What else happened? When he runs away from Lavan, not saying goodbye, right thing or wrong thing. Making a treaty with Lavan later on, good or bad. Bowing down to Esav, oh, what a big argument, right? Was that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? I mean, Rav Amital has all these sichot saying, we learn from Esav, what do you call it? It's okay to bow down to Goyim, just what do you call it? Our goal is not to be military power, our goal is to be, to be like Yaakov the Ishtam. And if we have to bow down to Esav, so bow down to Esav. Other people say, lots of midrashim and all the rabbis today say, we bow down for Esav 7 times. We have 7 churbans. There's almost every. I'm getting at every story with Yaakov has a terrible, very difficult moral dilemma. Rescuing Dinah. It's how passive was she supposed to be? He's arguing with Shimon and Levi. Where to bury Rachel? Remember? No, do we bury her on the spot because we're not going to travel with Nibu Hamet to carry her with us, or bring her to Marat Machpelah? How to react to Reuven with the incident with Bilhah and Reuven? With what should he do? Kick him out of the family, or accept it and realize maybe maybe he did something wrong? Okay, Yaakov's entire life is full of dilemmas, right? Not to mention what happens once Yosef is sold. What to do? How to get over it, what to do during the famine, what to do. Yaakov's entire life is projecting Am Yisrael, not only are you saying Galus, even in Israel. You follow? And what's Yaakov's life in a nutshell? And that's why his neder and Beit El is so important. Yaakov has a dream to build a house for God. It means to make a name for God. Not for him to be famous. Yaakov wants to accomplish a goal of being a light to other nations. Making a name for God. That's why he's chosen. That's why God's given him. And in an attempt to accomplish that, things just keep going wrong for good reasons. But Yaakov's entire life is just everywhere you turn, he's hosting a moral dilemma, what to do. He wants to do the right thing, and things just it doesn't work all the time. But despite all that, what does he do? He doesn't give up on his goal, even though he'll never fulfill it. Who's going to fulfill it? That's Vayvarech David. That's only David's going to fulfill his goal and at least get the thing started. Remember, he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokei Yisrael Avinu. It was Yaakov's neder. We only finally have peace from our enemies and build a house for God only at the end of David, beginning of Shlomo. It'll take hundreds and hundreds of years of Jewish history till we accomplish it. But what enabled you to get there, knowing that even when you're living in a generation when you can't fulfill the goal is still attainable. And it's important when you go through Jewish history, we have times that we're living in Yaakov mode too often. But when you're in Yaakov mode, it's always important not to lose sight of Avram mode. Got it? No, Yaakov mode is survival. He's struggling all the time, and almost no matter what he does, something's wrong. All the everyone has their narrative in the stories. Esav is sure he's right. Lavan is sure he's right. You know, Yaakov's kids, Leah's kids are sure they're right. You know, Shimon and Levi are sure they're right. He's always torn what to do. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. Now, I don't have an answer why I'm trying to prove that Yaakov must have come home to his father and said hi right away or soon, right? And I know he did from the end of the Parsha. It purposely doesn't say that. Instead, it says other things. In other words, it says what Yaakov was hoping to happen never happens. But he wants it to happen. And I think in saying other things happening when other things should be happening, you follow? I think it's part of Chumish's style. There's something there again. My question is stronger than the answer, but the key point is the insert of the Beit El story is to explain to you why Yaakov only restates his neder in Beit El and can't fulfill it. When it happened chronologically is less important. The fact that before Yaakov's ideal return to Beit El, there's two returns to Beit El. There's the ideal one where he gets his name changed, gets the blessing. That's the ideal, which I think happened chronologically first. Yaakov can't build a house for God yet because the house isn't ready yet, because he has to stop. He's not settled down yet. But before I get to Yaakov repeating his neder in Beit El to build a house for God, I precede it with the tragedy that happened in Shechem. Now, Yaakov was planning to live in Shechem, was planning to build a home in Shechem, he bought land there. He was hoping to make a name for God in Shechem. Everything backfired. They want to make a treaty with Dinah. Should we say yes or no? It all begins with a total incidental, right? Poor Dinah goes out to find some friends to play with, right? And she gets whatever happened with Dinah, right? Everything went well, and we get into a mess. Now what do? She got kidnapped. So what do we do with our kidnappers? We have to wipe out the city. Starts a war. You follow? God has to save us from our enemies. So Beit El becomes a city of refuge. God will take care of us. But at the same time, you can't lose your long-term goal of Beit El, making a house for God. And that's Yaakov calling the place Beit El again, naming his goal. He's not naming the city, he's naming his goal to build a house for God one day. And all through Jewish history, that's basically the Hanukkah story, that you have a goal to build a house for God, but you can't, so you light a candle. Remember, you have a goal. Okay, I'll take questions real fast.
Rabbi,
yeah, sure.
This is Yaakov's name. Ikev.
That's right. Oh, yeah. That's right. He should be Israel, but he remains Yaakov.
He remains Yaakov. Hashem responded, changed his plan.
Explain again.
Ikev. To delay.
Okay, but Beten Akav Achiv. He's holding something back.
That's the name, but his name. Why was he named Yaakov? Because he hold the Akev. But Yaakov should be called Akov. Should be called Ekev.
Oh, like crooked.
Yeah.
No, like God postponed.
Yaakov, Hashem delayed. B'lishon la'akev.
Oh, la'akev, to hold back. Okay, very good.
B'lishon la'akev.
Yeah. There's the Navi says, Yaakov, something like that. I think it's in Hosea.
Why did Yosef wind up in Shechem?
How did Yosef end up in Shechem?
Yeah, his burial. Why was he buried in Shechem?
Why was he buried in Shechem? Because that's his Nahalah. Yosef has two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, and the border between Ephraim and Menashe is Shechem. North of Shechem is Menashe, south of Shechem is Ephraim. Rachel is buried on the border between the biblical Kever Rachel, without getting myself into trouble. She's buried near Beit El, on the border between Binyamin and Yosef.
Between the kids.
Yeah. The burial spots is going to be symbolic of the tribes.
His burial spot is this place that Yaakov bought.
Yeah, outside the field. Yeah.
Is where Yosef was to be buried in that little plot.
I had a theory. Once I'm moving things out of order, I was just thought of that this week. Is that maybe maybe no. What's the question? After what happened in Shechem, how can Yaakov's kids be watching the sheep in Shechem when Yaakov's 17? No, how can they go back to Shechem to watch the sheep if everyone in Shechem hates them?
They don't. Yaakov was worried that it would happen, but in effect, it didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. But later on, the brothers go to watch the sheep in Shechem. They're living in Hebron, and they go to Shechem to watch their sheep, which is far away. But you would think that Shechem's a dangerous place for them.
No, Shrem wasn't Shechem wiped out.
Yeah, but he was still worried about the neighboring cities.
So the neighboring city is not Shechem.
Yeah, no, but the neighbor's going to come and retaliate.
Ah,
Yeah. There's that Rav Semet has a whole shir. He claims that Shalem is Salem, and he claims that it's a little family clan. And he didn't wipe out an entire city, he wiped out the immediate family, basically. And not the city of Shechem, but the city of the suburb of Salem near Shechem. And he didn't wipe out the entire. It was just it wasn't a Sabra Shatila kind of thing. It was just the immediate family he killed. Anyway, yes, and therefore it wasn't so bad. But that's a whole argument between Rabbi Menachem and Rabbi Samet. I'll share with you something great, okay?
Wasn't it 10 years later when Yosef went?
Yeah, it's many years later. So maybe things quieted down by then. But I'm wondering, maybe Michrat Yosef happened before the Shechem incident. Once the Shechem incident happened later, maybe it's 20 years later. That solves the age of the kids and everything. Right? It's not important for this year, but that was just something to think about. Once it's later, so it can be as later as you want.
Is it possible that Rivka died and that's why she didn't call him back?
That was impossible. I think it's logical. Yeah, but it's sad that after Rivka does what she did, setting up the lying and everything, and still in the bracha, we never hear from her, do we?
Right.
So it could be she died. We know she died. We know she was buried in Marat Machpelah, but we're never told about her
of course
death.
she died.
Yeah.
But
we're never told about her death or her burial. Just only that she was buried there.
It's
Yaakov
strange that you hear about Devorah dying, but not about Rivka.
Yeah, but that's in the sad psukim. That's a tragedy. And so Beit El is a tragedy, isn't it? That's my key point. Beit El becomes a tragedy. Beit El was a symbol of hope. I'm going to build a house for God, make a name for God, establish a bite, be established and be God's people. And instead it becomes a tragedy. It becomes a city of refuge, and all for good reasons, because everyone wants to do the right thing. But trying to do the right thing, sometimes the wrong thing happens. I'm trying not to take sides on what's happening in Israel today. Because Baruch Hashem, God's been good to us the last couple of weeks. Hope he'll continue with the good news. But
Amen.
Yeah, but difficult thing. But we're not in a situation where everyone looks up to us. We're it's not happening in the ideal way. So is Israel basically a country of refuge? That was a big argument in early Zionism. Is Israel a country to stay alive? Because it's dangerous in Europe, we need a place of refuge. Or is Israel going to be like to other nations? There's a big argument in the Zionist conferences. And Rav Kook always said, if you don't have a goal, your goal can't be survival. It might be a need, but it can't be your goal. You have to have a higher goal.
Well, that was the house of God.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Even though I only caught the last 20 minutes of the shir, but okay.
You lucked out because the first 20 minutes, the first half hour was boring technical stuff.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. You can hear the rabbi on Sunday morning, and every Sunday morning, 11:15. Next Thursday night, Sarah Gordon is going to be giving the Parsha shir. She lives in Teaneck, if I'm not mistaken, and on the younger side, it's good, the younger woman scholar. And okay, my shir tomorrow morning, 9:15 a.m. Rabbi Leibtag can't come even if he wants to, because Shabbos is like 4:25 in Israel.
4:17, yeah.
4:17. You come for 2 minutes. Okay, 9:15 tomorrow. We haven't yet.
I put it on the Shabbos clock.
Okay, thank you. We haven't publicized it. Probably Sunday, Monday, we'll get all the, we're just working out all the details, but just let people know, last year we did, our Yemei Yun, we did before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur this year, Tisha B'Av, all your Yemei Yun. So last year we did one on Hanukkah and one on December 25th, Judaism and the rest of the world. Of course, this year, Christmas and Hanukkah are on the same day, that's kind of cute, whatever. There's that's not a coincidence. So we're doing our Yom Yun on December 25th. We'll be having, that's a Wednesday. That's 2 weeks from yesterday. So probably from like 9:15 in the morning till, I don't know, 2:30, something like that on the exact time. I think looks like we're going to have 8 speakers at 40 minutes each. So just you can mark that in your calendar unless you have other plans on December 25th. It's actually Erev Chanukah. It's Christmas Bo Bayom, but the first, we light Chanukah the night of the 25th. Okay, doesn't matter.
And the 24th, yeah.
Yeah, no, the 24th, that's just Yom Chol, but right, December 25th that night, we light the first candle. Anyways, okay, that's just something coming ahead, and actually pretty soon, we're already in the middle of December, we have a number of new courses coming in January, but we'll let you know about that later. Okay, everybody have a Laila Tov, a Shabbat Shalom. Always invite a friend who hasn't come to come before the year end. Your friend has to come and participate in a Torah Motion class. And all right, everybody be well. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Rabbi Leibtag. You're out of
Wonderful.
your mind. Like I said, you like to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but okay, Baruch Hashem, it's very nice to teach Torah. You know what the Rav said? The Rav Soloveitchik used to say when he said, he's a good Maggid Shir. He said he could come to YU at 3 o'clock in the morning, and now he's giving Shir, and hundreds of people would come. But he would complain when he would talk about on the heart, the kids, they had no interest. They just wanted his intellect, but his emotion, they couldn't care less about. But it came at 3 o'clock in the morning. All the students would show up to the shir, the Rav Shir. No, that's so maybe we should reverse it. Have Rabbi Leibtag here and everybody in Israel and see what happens. How many people come to the shir? Probably less, but okay. All right, everybody, enough joking around.
The goal that was saying the goal was to say I was in the Rav Shir. People say I was in the Rav Shir.
Yeah.
Many people went to Rav Shir, say I was in the Rav Shir. The
Right.
goal was being able to say I was in the Rav Shir.
Right. I understand.
They didn't understand.
I was in the Rav Shir, right. Yeah, listen, did you ever hear the Rabbi? Were you ever in a shir of his?
I went to college in Israel. All my friends.
Oh, I know you went to college in Israel. That's what I'm saying. Did you ever have a chance to speak?
I was never in YU regular, but all my colleagues and all my friends were all the whole English speaking American staff were all Talmidim Rav.
Right, you were in Machon Lev.
Yeah. But that was like towards the end of his prime years when they were always Rabbik and Rav.
Right. By the time I came to YU, the Rav was he had almost had left. It was at the tail end. But yeah. Okay. Anyways, all right. Laila Tov, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for getting up in the middle of the night.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.